So the title of this presentation, as you can see, it's called Change. Avoid it, embrace it, stomp it into smithereens, and other options. Sometimes people like change. Sometimes they were looking forward to change, and so they embrace change. They invite it home for dinner. They introduce it to their parents. But lots of times we, as living creatures, are resistant to change. Animals, all animals, I believe, are resistant to change because what helps us feel safe is a predictable routine. When you're born, so we have little Danny, who is an expert on being born and on being a baby. And one of the things that you try to do with a child is to give them a set routine. You go to bed at the same time, you eat at the same time, so that you can get your cycles ready, and you trust your parents that they will be there at mealtime with food. They will be there at bedtime to tuck you in. And it's routine that makes us feel secure and therefore, of course, makes us feel safe. The predictability of this is going to happen at this time always. So we feel safe and secure, and therefore we feel happy because we are safe and we are secure. And you'll notice that all of that is written in one font because there comes a time when there's a tipping point. And safety and security kind of morph into complacency and boredom and routine, and things are too much the same each time. And maybe this coincides with puberty, I don't know, but you're looking for more adventure. You're looking for things that aren't quite so predictable, and you want to venture out. So you become complacent. You fall into what somebody, one of our people who is a songwriter, I said, what is a definition for comfort zone? And he said, a velvet rut, where you are content to be in the same boring place because it is safe and secure, and you are afraid to venture out into other things. Unemployment kind of pushes you out of that complacency, doesn't it? It forces you, because the next step beyond the comfort zone is atrophy, where you don't use those adaptation skills, and so they get rusty, they fall away, they're done, they're gone. And then you become afraid of change because it is the unknown. And so if you think about it, lots of times in jobs we have that, where people will stay with a job that they hate because they're afraid of this. They're afraid of unemployment. They're afraid of not having that steady income. And sometimes it doesn't take but one time of being unemployed to make you hang on for dear life with the next job that you get because you hate this so much. And so it's like, I don't care what happens, I'm going to stick with this job even though I hate this job because I don't want to ever go through this again. And that's a sad thing. That's a sad thing. So understand about the allure of routine and the danger of routine. The allure of change, wanting something different, and the danger of maybe that different thing is going to be worse than what you have now. It's a two-edged sword all the way around. I didn't know what I was going to talk about this week, and actually, somewhat recently, I gave a presentation on what's your problem, and we talked about, what is the issue that you're dealing with. But somebody, I think it was Diane and Charles, had been talking about Who Moved My Cheese. Let me see the hands of those of you who have never read Who Moved My Cheese. Really? That is astounding. I thought everybody on the planet has read Who Moved My Cheese. So Who Moved My Cheese was written in 1998. It's a very short book. I'm going to have to now buy a bunch of them and give them out to you because it's part of the American culture, and I think you should all know about it. But at any rate, it is a book about change, and there are 4 fictitious characters, 2 that are kind of mouse-like and 2 that are kind of humanoids, and they're all little people, and they all reside within a maze. And so at some point, these little people, little creatures, found a considerable pile of cheese. And so every day they would get up from wherever it was that they spent the night, they'd get their running shoes on, and they would run to the cheese. And they were secure, they were safe, they had a food source, they were happy. And one of the little mice was named Sniff, and he was always sniffing the cheese and seeing when it was going to go bad, and he was always kind of on the alert, checking around with his sensors to see when was this a little euphoric place, when was it going to go away? Was there diminishing stores of cheese, whatever, was some of it going to go away? So he was always on the alert, looking for kind of impending disaster. And then there was another one that was Scurry, and Scurry was the fastest of all four of them, and he was always ready to go someplace. He was on, you know, he was ready for a run someplace or another. And then the two human kind of characters were Hem and Haw. And Hem was one of those people that felt so secure that he was not looking for anything else. He was happy in his little world, his secure world, did not venture out, did not suspect anything was going to ever change. And then Haw was just, I don't know, he was eventually, when things all went bad, Hem was reluctant to see other possibilities, and Haw was the one that said, you know, we have to change, we have to move out, we have to try some new things. So anyway, sometimes in some companies they would pass out free copies of Who Moved My Cheese, and they would talk about which one are you, which one do you identify with. Are you the one that's always looking for things to go wrong? You're always analyzing, you're very analytical, and you're always looking at the signs that your industry is in decline, or your product is going to not have a future or whatever, so you're always looking for opportunities and a plan B and another way out. Are you always one of those people, or are you one of the ones that says, you know, I don't want to think about it? Are you the Scarlett O'Hara one that says, I will think about that tomorrow? I'm not going to think about that today because it is distasteful. So anyway, which one are you? There are some people, oh, and then I guess I should, since so many of you haven't read it, I should tell you the rest of the story. So one day, Hem and Haw show up at the cheese store, and it's gone. There's so little left, and the little mice creatures are also gone because Sniff figured out, we got to get out of here. There's no more food, and Scurry said, I'm with you, and they set off running. And so Hem and Haw show up, and it's like, where's the cheese? Who moved my cheese? They're looking all over. They can't find it. And Hem says, well, we'll come back tomorrow. Maybe it'll be here then. And Haw says, I'm thinking not, but okay. So they come back the next day, and there's no cheese. And Haw says, you know, I think we need to go look. Maybe you know, Snip and Scurry found some. We should go check that out. No, I'm not going to do it, and maybe it'll come back, and it might be worse, and there's dangers out there. And Hem never did move out throughout the book. Eventually, Haw goes out, and he kind of likes it. He kind of likes not being confined to that one little place. And he says, you know, this is kind of fun, exploring. I like exploring. I like finding new things. And so as he goes through the maze, he writes little aphorisms, little things, lessons learned on the wall, that you know, you shouldn't be afraid, and that fear will restrict you, and other things, little things he's learned along the way. And eventually, he does find an enormous store oak cheese. It's bigger than the original one, and he goes back to try to, you know, leave signs for him, hoping that Hem will also eventually venture out and will find that what was ahead was actually better than what you left behind. So it's a thing about change. Do you resist it? Do you embrace it? Does it make you better? Does it make you worse? What are the lessons learned, and so forth? There are lots of people, perhaps some of you here, who I believe are change experts, just like our 2 world travelers or our 3 world travelers. Travel is kind of scary. because it's the unknown and lots of things can go wrong. But oh my gosh, travel to different countries and different people and figuring out how to find a restaurant, how to find your hotel, and interacting with people and asking for help in a number of different languages, looking pitiful, meeting people. It's enriching in so many ways. And it was a little bit scary, but mostly it was fabulous. And lots of change is a little bit scary, but mostly it's fabulous. And so there are people that through work or through life changes, they become experts. One of the experts are military families. Any of you grow up in a military family? 1, 2, okay. So how many times did you move? A lot? 3 or 4 times? How many times did you move?
About that.
Okay. Military families, kids in the military, they have to adapt to new schools all the time. A similarity, I was listening to it on the radio coming into Job Club today. They were talking about migrant families. Same thing. The kids have to go to new schools all the time, and usually their home area where they spend the most time, they don't get back there until the end of all of the migratory season, and so kids always start school just before Christmas. So here come the migrant kids coming into school late. They're behind. They don't speak English as well. They haven't learned the math, so they start with a deficit, and plus they're low income. So there's lots of reasons for school not to be a good experience for those kids, and yet they've traveled all over the place. They know a lot about different parts of America. They have a very rich sense of experience, but they have to adapt to new places and new kinds of people all the time. Another group that obviously is having to go through changes that we cannot even comprehend are the refugees. You hear about the Syrian refugees, and just one piece, just having war in your country. I can't imagine that. We're so fortunate in the United States that we have never had to experience that. These people had jobs just like you, had families just like you, lived in neighborhoods just like you, just like all of us. And all of a sudden, and they go to the park and they protest and they say, we'd like a change in government, and they think this is doable. It's been doable in other countries, and all of a sudden they're in war and they're being bombed and attacked, and they have no food and they have nothing, and they're in fear for their lives, and it's like, my God, what do we do now? And so they emigrate, they flee, and there's another huge change of leaving everything that you have, everything that was your security, and you go to another country, and then maybe beyond that, you're in a refugee camp in Turkey. You think, I've got to go further. You take all the money you have and you pay somebody, and then you lose everything in a boat, and then you're in another country and you haven't had a shower in a month, and you haven't eaten, and your kids are terrified, and I can't imagine any of it. I cannot imagine adapting to one piece of that. And yet, if you were a parent in that situation, I'll bet you were still trying to create security and routine, and let's go to bed at the same time, and let's tell bedtime stories, and let's sing our songs, and let's learn our numbers, and you're trying to create some kind of normalcy, because normalcy is sane, and all that other stuff is insane. And adapting to that kind of drastic, horrific change is impossible. And you look for little tiny things that you can do to establish some sort of a routine and make it be the same, because you can't deal with the change and the enormity of the change. So refugees have to adapt to lots and lots of different things. Contract employees. How many of you have done that? A lot of you. Not as bad as being a refugee, but similar in some ways. Your meals are more consistent, but you have to adapt to different companies, different management styles, different assignments, different cultures. And the people that are successful, that really like being contractors and do it all the time because they make more money, they have to be change artists. They have to be able to adapt immediately to all of these new things. So you're good with change, maybe. Some of you that have always worked for another company and have never liked being a contractor because of the inconsistency of it, you have to adapt to that. You have to figure out how to play that game. So you're all actors. Actors are kind of change artists as well, because they have to be different people. And they go for long periods of time with no work, waiting tables, and then all of a sudden, they're somebody else. And so they have to adapt to that. What other kinds of other people are change artists? Can you think of some other examples?
Politicians?
Absolutely. They change with every audience. They have to adapt to every audience. And then sometimes they change their minds on issues. They flip-flop. Whether that actually comes because they've learned something that has caused them to make an intelligent change, or whether they've decided that is no longer electable, but they change on issues. That's a good one. Anybody else think of yeah?
Sports players.
What?
Sports players.
Sports players. Like going from team to team and having to adjust. We're going to take you out of being a tailback and we're going to make you be a center. We're going to change your position. We're going to change the plays. Now you're defense instead of offense, and then plus the whole coaching style of the various people. You have to learn about that. And Diane, you had one?
In some ways, parents, when they leave home, you have to reinvent yourself. Your role changes. You may have to go back to school. But your role changes as a parent.
That's a huge change to have to adapt to. And in fact, I give a personality test in my Monday morning class. It's just a little it's almost like a parlor game. But I've seen that when people so here's your personality. You take your test and we label you, you are this, or you are these two. And very often, once somebody has become either a manager, a supervisor, or a parent, which is also a supervisory role, their personality changes. And if you were sort of a party animal before you got that position, then all of a sudden, once you have to manage people, you have to become more serious. You have to become a better manager of your time. You have to become more efficient. You have to become more organized. You can't manage people if you don't have those skills yourself. So you do a personality change, and very often we have a different personality when we're in the workplace than we do when we're in the home. And it's all because we've had to adapt to that new role that we have to assume. Yeah?
Can musicians dance when they're playing for different audiences or in different parts of the country? You know, sometimes they want to be too country. Here, they want to be more rock, they want to be more folk. And, you know, you have different kinds of styles that they adopt.
That's true. That musicians is another good one. Think of Yo-Yo Ma. It comes up through classical, but now he does bluegrass, he does rock, he does all sorts of experimental stuff. Yes, sir?
Did you mention acquisition integration?
No, but...
Acquisition, I mean, they not only moved the cheese, but the whole maze has changed, the culture.
That is true. You're in a new maze. That is true. So if you didn't hear what he said when a company goes through a merger, an acquisition, they are acquired by another company that might have an extremely different culture. And all of a sudden, none of the rules that you learned that worked for you in the past are applicable within the new environment. So he said they not only moved the cheese, they moved the maze. And suddenly, you thought you knew where you were going and how it worked, and all of a sudden you don't. And they bring in a whole new culture. And that can be disconcerting. So yeah, there's that as well. Some people they have discovered are actually wired to adapt to change more successfully than others. They have discovered when they did the genome identification, they discovered that there is a gene that determines who is more adaptable to change. And so they have experimented with rats where they have, or mice, let's see, we'll say mice, in keeping with the Who Moved My Cheese, and they have bred them for either an emphasis on the adaptability gene or a de-emphasis or whatever on the adaptability gene. And then once they raise these mice, they put them in a situation to determine, to see the results of that adaptability. And so they took them out of the cage where they were secure, took them out of their environment, and they moved them into a new big cage. And the mouse that had the gene for adaptability was so excited and sniffed all around and was experimenting, and where are the new places to play, and oh, look at this, I hadn't seen this before, this is fabulous, look at this. And the other one crouched by the gate, crouched by the door, paralyzed with fear. And that is exactly what happens to so many of us. We are afraid to try something new. We are afraid to try a different way to look for a job. We are afraid to go to networking meetings. We are afraid to take something that we haven't ever done before. We are paralyzed with fear. We are afraid of the job search. We can't even get out of the house. And that paralysis is a characteristic of stress. What is unemployment if not a heck of a lot of stress? And so the inability to even get started, the inability to function, the inability to answer questions in an interview, it's a lot of it is just because the stress that's created because it's a new situation. And you're not wired for doing it. That doesn't mean that you can't get better at it. Doesn't mean that you can't get a better attitude. Part of it is acting, is how good an actor are you? Lots of times we act as though we like our jobs, whether we like them or not. You know, some of us are better actors than we think. But the ability to throw yourself into a role and be the person that you need to be for that situation is a really good survival tool. And I'll tell you two little stories about acting and how some of you might want to just try this. First story has to do with my grandson back when he was like 3 years old. You wouldn't think of him as being a good actor, but he was very shy, and he was kind of a quirky teenager now. But when he was 3 years old, he was kind of a quirky little kid, and sometimes you couldn't get him to do things as himself, but you could get him to do things as somebody else. And for a long time, that somebody else was Cookie Monster. That was his kind of alter ego. And so I took him one time, we were looking at an open house, and the lady said, you know, what's your name, and hi, and so forth. And I said, can you say hello? And he was just, you know, all shy. And I said, can the Cookie Monster say hello? Hello. He was acting. He was playing a role. And he could, through that role, he could do things that, as Michael, he couldn't do. And that was a good lesson. Before he was born, however, years before he was born, 25 years before he was born, I was newly married, and I had 2 little babies, and I had to go live, my family, and I had to go live with my in-laws in East Texas, and this was back in the 70s, and I was kind of a hippie kind of person, and you know, had strange ideas and wore strange clothes and looked kind of odd. And my in-laws were salt of the earth, East Texas Baptists. My mother-in-law had never worked. All she taught, her life was cooking and television. Cooking and television. Didn't read magazines or newspapers or anything like that. It was really cooking and television. And she did not know what to do with me. And sometimes she would say, come on, darling, why don't you come with me and let's go look through my closet and see if we can find something for y'all to wear. And so she didn't like my clothes, and so she gave me some of her clothes to wear. And what was in style in East Texas among the Baptists at that time was these 2-piece outfits that were, they were like knit, polyester knit, little bell-bottom pant things, but yeah, pantsuits, but little sleeveless knit, weird things. And so, you know, your personality kind of comes out in your clothes, you know. And so I put on those outfits, and I was like, who am I? And I broke out in a rash from everywhere those clothes were. I broke out in a rash. I had these welts, you know, and I was just miserable. I was so miserable. And I thought, okay, let's see how good an actress I am. And back then, this was when Sonny and Cher, some of you are too young to know who those people are, but Sonny and Cher had a show on TV, and there were different parts that Cher would play, and one of them was, I think her name was Laverne, and she was always in the washteria, and she had those kinds of clothes on, and her bra strap was always hanging on her arm, and she had these big glasses that were all sequiny, you know, and she was kind of trailer trash, kind of, and I thought, I can be that person. And so I just pretended that I was in a play, and this was my role, and this was my costume, and I talked about food, and I talked about TV, and we got along. We were like, we were so tight, and it was, you can do anything, you know. I don't want to call it survival, because it was just a rash there, but, you know, it's how do you adapt to change? Do you fight it? Do you embrace it? Do you look at things from somebody else's perspective? Do you walk in their shoes? Can you see things the way they see it? Or do you fight the whole thing because you want to be him and you want to just make it be the way it used to be? We all want it to be the way it used to be. Everybody in here probably wants to have the job they used to have at the salary they used to have it. You want to go to work at your desk that you made it exactly the way you wanted it, and you're in love with the past, and that's what you want to have it be again. Well, you know, don't be him, because that cheese is not coming back. What can you do looking forward? What can you do looking forward? Maybe the bigger cheese is out there, but you got to venture forth and you got to try some stuff. So, at any rate, males and females, do you suppose there's a difference between, do you think one gender is more adaptable to change than others? You think they're more adaptable? Really? I don't know, and I just thought I'd throw that in there and see if you think it is or not. Is it a personality thing, so it doesn't really matter so much if you're male or female, but it matters if you're a personality that tends to be a little bit more intransigent, a little bit more rigid, and other people have a personality where they're a little bit more conciliatory. In general, and I don't want to say that all men are like this and all women are like that, but in general, I think females tend to be a little bit more nurturing and adaptable, and not quite so rigid, but maybe not. Maybe women are more and guys are more, you know, oak, sturdy oak, without that part. I don't know. Think about it though. And then the evolution. Adapting to change rapidly, we know from history, whether you believe in evolution or not, if you think those dinosaurs never really did live here, adapting quickly, we can't take millions of years to adapt to change, because we have to do it quickly. We have to adapt quickly. We got to get out there. One of the things about adapting quickly is taking advantage of opportunities. These courses and things like that. Sometimes people say, well, I'm not going to sign up for a course because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a job right away. And so my skills are good as they are. And then all of a sudden, you know, 6 months has gone by and you don't have any unemployment left. And employers are saying, so what did you do that was constructive since you were last employed? And you're like, well, I've been looking for a job. And they say, well, did you acquire any new skills? Do you have any new certifications? A certification program you can get pretty quickly, and that's something that will make you more employable. Our last speaker last week, I was a little surprised that his entire talk was about sleep, because the 2 times that he had spoken before, he's a futurist, and he had a lot of data about technology and the rapid changes that technology are causing. And one of the things he said was that in many industries, a professional certification is more marketable than an advanced degree. because it's more real time, it's more immediate applicability to the skills that you've just learned. And so people that take advantage and change and move into a slightly different career field, sometimes those are the ones that survive. So you have to change rapidly. You can't sit there and maybe designate a week or so when you're going to just go to the bar and then think about the past and how wonderful it was, and then eventually you got to say, let's move on. Okay? Plan A, plan B, and you better have a plan C, and you better, if it's not working, you better keep on going. Have as many plans as you can have. If this one's not working, I'm going to move on to this one. If this one's not working, I'm going to move on to that one. And a big chunk of that has to do with tethers. Are there things that are holding you back from making change? One time I read an article that said, if you haven't found a job within a designated amount of time, if you haven't found a job within 4 months or whatever, it might be because something is holding you back. And when I heard that, when I read that article, the picture that came in my mind was a hot air balloon that was tethered. It couldn't fly. It was held back. And I gave a presentation about this something like 15 years ago. And we said, what are some of the tethers that hold you back? Now, sometimes people would say, well, I have a home here. I know I could get a job if I moved. But I have a home in Austin. That's a tether, right? You've got to stay in Austin. Lots of people like Austin. They don't want to move from Austin. We've heard many times from Victoria that her tether, what keeps her from getting some of the jobs that she really wants, is that she uses public transportation. She doesn't have a car. And that is a huge tether. That's a tether the size of your arm. Age discrimination, we hear that. It certainly exists in Austin. That's a tether. That might be keeping you from getting a job. Lack of a degree. I talked to a girl in my class last Wednesday, and she said she's been a supply chain manager at some of Austin's best companies. She does procurement, and she said she's never found it difficult to get a job, and when she worked, she never found it difficult to get promoted, and now she can't get anything, and it's because she has an associate's degree. And she said, everybody wants a bachelor's. I can't get them to look at me. I can't get them to talk to me. And if only I had this, I could be hired. If only I didn't have this tether, I could be hired. And there are lots and lots and lots of other tethers. If we had a little bit more time, we could go over them. Sometimes people have more than one tether. You got a lot of things holding you back. And when I think about that, the vision that comes into my mind is Gulliver. Each little rope that the Lilliputians put on him was a thread, but he had enough of them that he was immobilized. And sometimes you have so many, I don't want to call them excuses really, because they're serious barriers to moving ahead. But sometimes you can have so many that you really can't. You can't, there's no solution because you've got so many. There's a lot of them. So one of the things that's good for a SWAT team to do, that's good for a group of people to do, because sometimes we can't see beyond our tether. It's such a big problem for us that we can't see a solution out of that. But sometimes when you brainstorm, and what I was going to have you do was look at a few of the either the barriers that I put on the wall before, or coming up with some more barriers, some barriers that you might have, and see if, as a group, we could come up with some solutions. So what if you say, I know I could get a job if I could move, but I can't move because I own a home. What's the solution? Okay. See if you can work remotely. That's one. Diane?
Internet, they have me rented out some things, so you don't like to do place, you come back.
Ah, that's so smart. That's very smart. My next door neighbors did that, and they were also world travelers. They're from Chile. And he got offered a fabulous job in Chile, but they were afraid to cut that tether completely. So they rented out their house. He was a firefighter here in Austin, and he got a leave of absence to go try out this new job. And if it didn't work out, which as it turns out after a year, even though they were from there, they said, it's different, and we feel more comfortable in Austin. And so they came back, and everything was ready for them. So yeah, you can venture out and try something else. Anybody have another one?
Move anyhow. I actually did that for 2.5 years. Moved to Houston, didn't sell my house, didn't rent it out, had a wonderful job, and as soon as I got the chance, then I came back. But I kept my house here. It's possible. It can be done.
It can be done. It can be done. Tim McMullen, a lot of you know him. He got a job in San Antonio and kept his house here and just rented a little apartment, came home on the weekends. So, you know, there are things you can do. There are things you can do. One of our people, I can't remember what his name is anymore, but he heard the original Tether talk and decided that that was right. What was Austin anymore? He needed to open himself up, look for jobs in a wider area. And as soon as he made that mental decision, he started getting all kinds of offers in Austin. But he put himself out there and said, I'm open to it. I'm ready. I'm open to it. I'll try something new. I'll go some other place. And all of a sudden he got a great job in Austin. So sometimes it's just an attitude thing. So there's a solution to that. And rent it out and take the job. We talked about that. Sell it and move. We talked about that. Work remotely. So maybe it's time to get another plan. Every one of those problems, there's probably a gazillion solutions. The transportation problem that she always talks about, and this doesn't necessarily only apply to Victoria. We have lots of people that have to, they can't, it's going to take 3 hours on a bus in order to get to a job, so they have to try to get a job here. But sometimes, if it's am I going to be homeless or am I going to have a job, you take a job that you can walk to. And if it doesn't pay you enough, then you get 2 jobs that you can walk to. I mean, you can do anything as long as you're not going to have to do it for the rest of your life. So think about it. What is your, what's your plan Z? What is your survival job? And are you going to have to take 3 survival jobs? How many of you have worked at least 2 jobs at one time? About a third of you. Anybody work 3 jobs at one time? See, our 2 world travelers worked 3 jobs at one time. You remember that show that used to be on TV in living color? Those Rastafarians? I love that part. So the daughter brought home her new boyfriend. He was a doctor. And the father said, "What? You only got 1 job? You lazy son of a... I got 23 jobs. I got to go change my uniform." But the work ethic, you can do it. You can work 2 jobs. You can work 3 jobs. You can work long hours in order to survive if you have to, in order to solve this problem, get yourself on your feet, and then go back to plan A. But what is it going to take? The serenity prayer, accept the things you cannot change, change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. What are the changes you can make? And open your mind. Just say, I know I can change this. And sometimes if you can't see it, get a team, get a SWAT team together and say, what do you come up with as solutions? I think there are many solutions to every problem. But sometimes we can't see it ourselves. We have to have other people. Have an open mind. Try different things. I just said that. Friends can help you see answers. Anything is possible. This is my big finish. Anything is possible except for my little PowerPoint. Diane.
One thing to think about is roommates, getting a roommate. And one of my friends did this. We have 2 seminaries here in town. One is Episcopalian, I believe the other is Lutheran. They have people come here. They're looking for a room. She ran into one who was a seminary student. He was fantastic. Just wanted a bedroom and a place to go while he was finishing up. Gave her enough money. He mowed the lawn. He missed things. And it was a safe way to get a roommate.
That's a good idea. Audra has had roommates who were foreign students, right?
Yes.
Tell us real quickly about that.
I've hosted some exchange students. There's a school here called Texas Intensive English Consortium, and they have people come from all over the world to study English here, and they're always looking for people to host the students. You either can host them, and some of them it's just them renting a room. If you host them, there's responsibilities with feeding them and sightseeing, but it's fun.
But so she hosts foreign students, and the program pays her. They pay her a salary to have the students in their house. Yeah, that's right. So students are vetted. The seminary students, how can that go wrong? But that's another thing. And when people say, "Well, I don't want to have strangers in my house," well, are you going to lose your house? Have strangers in your house. You know, make sure you vet them. Have some rules of engagement. But make some concessions, do some things that might not be according to your plan A, but fit them into plan Z. You know, keep your house, keep your lifestyle, get on your feet, but think expansively about what are some solutions to these problems. And if you can't see it, get some creative people. Lots of folks say, I'm not going to do contract work. I'm looking for a regular, steady job. Do contract work. Sign up for temp agencies. Get something coming in. Get some activity going. Do the volunteer stuff. Get more and more people to know who you are. But act. Do something different from what you were doing before.